Hello, everyone. So today we're going to talk about audience analysis. Before you do any kind of speech, you want to think about who is your audience. And why do you want to know that? Because you might have the same message, but depending on the makeup of your audience, you might shift it slightly to make sure that the message reaches that particular audience. So let's take a look at what are the different types of audiences and then how to conduct an audience analysis. So there are 5 different types of audiences, and the first one is a captive audience. And a captive audience basically means that they have to be there. They don't have a choice. So you can see here the people in this room don't look like they necessarily want to be there. It looks like they have to be there. So who do you know that's a captive audience? Well, in many ways, you are. Students who have to be in a classroom or have to be in an online environment, you are captive because you can't necessarily leave. Now, a captive audience can change in the moment to something else. They might be captive and then enjoy it, and they might be captive and then not like it at all. But this basically just means that you have to be there. You don't have a choice. So that's the first kind of audience. The second kind of audience is a committed audience. So this is an audience who's committed to either the speaker or the topic, that's there because they want to be there. They really believe in what's being talked about or the person who's speaking about it. So if you think about examples of committed audiences, think of political rallies. If you go to a political rally to support a particular candidate, you're a committed audience. You love that candidate. You want to be there to support them because you hope that they get elected to office. So that's an example of a committed audience. A hostile audience is an audience that does not appreciate either you as a speaker or the message that you're trying to convey. Now, you see in this picture a protest, and a protest, of course, is a hostile audience. But you don't need to be throwing tomatoes at someone in order to be considered a hostile audience. If I go to a conference, on a vegan conference, for example, and I talk about the importance of eating meat, I might have a hostile audience on my hand. I can expect that it would be a hostile audience because my message is counter to something that they believe in at a core level. So even if they don't necessarily throw anything at me or heckle me, they might be sitting in a certain way that shows me, you're not really happy to be there and you're not really happy with me for talking about what I'm talking about. So a hostile audience is one that's really unhappy with the message or unhappy with the person who's saying the message. The fourth kind of audience is a concerned audience. And sometimes there's confusion between committed and concerned audience. So if you remember, committed is, I want to be here because I support and believe in the message and the speaker. Concerned audience is somebody who is interested in knowing more about a particular topic, but hasn't necessarily made up their mind whether or not they support the topic or the message in the way that the speaker is delivering it. So think about going to an education forum where somebody is talking about potential new laws in education. You don't necessarily know how you feel about it yet, but you're concerned about the topic, so you go to try to make up your mind and learn more. So that would be a concerned audience. And the last type of audience is a casual audience. A casual audience is an audience who just happened to be there. So don't think of it in terms of, oh, I'm dressed informally, or, I'm just kind of being casual today. It's really more about the fact that the speaker is speaking, and whatever audience they get is audience that just happened to be there in the moment. I live in New York City, and a lot of times if I'm on a subway platform, somebody's playing a violin or they're singing, that is a casual audience. I just happened to walk by. I didn't decide, hey, I'm going to go listen to this person singing today. So anybody who shows up is a casual audience. So the 5 types of audiences are captive, committed, concerned, hostile, and casual. Now, can you be more than one? Of course. You can be a captive audience who started out because you had to be there, and then you really, really enjoyed the message and the speaker, and you become committed to what they're talking about. Or you can start out as a casual audience and then become hostile. So there are ways to mesh, but it's important to understand what audience as a public speaker you're going to be dealing with, because it's really going to help you to figure out how to hone your message in a proper way. So those are the types of audience. You want to understand that before you go into any kind of speech. The other thing you want to be aware of is doing an audience analysis. And there are really 3 things you want to think about in an audience analysis, and we're going to go over each one. The first is demographic. The second is attitudinal, and the third is environmental. So you can see in the picture when you walk in, you don't necessarily know what the makeup of your audience is. So an audience analysis is something that you do before you go in to speak. You know you're invited to go speak somewhere and you're thinking, okay, who is this audience? What are they going to think about my topic? And what is the room going to look like? Those are all the kinds of things you want to think about. So let's look at them one at a time. First of all, you have an audience demographic analysis. And demographics is really if you think about a census report, a lot of those things are demographic. What is their age? What is their gender? What's their ethnicity, religion, occupation, education? And you'll see ... because it could be more things than that, but that's something that you might want to start from. If you think about group membership, what that really means is this audience particularized to some sort of group that they belong to? So think right now, as we're thinking about the elections, a group membership might be, what political party do you belong to? Another group membership might be veterans. So anything where there's a closed group membership in a particular audience, you can think of that as part of that demographic. So for example, students might be a group membership if somebody's going to give a talk at a college. Now, in terms of audience attitudinal analysis, this goes below the surface. So you see in this picture of the iceberg, on the top is a lot of the demographic information, stuff that you can glean from someone just by virtue of who they are or what identity they hold. When you think about an attitudinal analysis, it's what happens below that iceberg. What is the attitude towards that particular topic? What knowledge do they have about the topic? And what are their beliefs and values? Now, why would you want to know this? Because I'll use the example of going to the vegan conference to talk about meat. What am I going to know about their attitude towards my topic? Well, I know they're not going to be particularly happy about it. They might not know a lot about the topic, or they might know a lot. Maybe they've done a lot of research, which is what turned them into becoming a vegan. In terms of beliefs or values, what do I know? Well, I can glean that if somebody became a vegan, there's probably a few reasons why they're at that conference. Maybe they think that killing animals is wrong, and that's a deeply held belief or value. Maybe they think that we don't have the right to eat meat. So those are the kinds of things from an audience attitudinal analysis that I would want to think about before I go in to give my particular speech. And then the last piece is audience environmental analysis. So this is the actual makeup of the place and the situation in which you're giving that particular speech. What is the size of the room? What's the temperature? What are internal noises I have to be worrying about? What does this type of space look like? What is the timing of that particular speech? So if you look here in the park, you think, well, if it's August in the middle of somewhere that's really hot, what's going to happen to the audience? Well, they might get really tired and start to fall asleep. If I'm giving a speech in the middle of Grand Central Station in rush hour, then maybe some of that internal noise might be people trying to get to places or trains coming by. And those are things I'm going to want to think about ahead of time so that I have a sense of what I'm going to do about my speech. In terms of timing, if somebody says, I want you to give a speech starting at 7 o'clock in the morning, well, what am I going to know? I'm going to know that the energy is going to be a little low. So I'm going to think about how can I ramp up the energy that early in the morning to make sure that my audience stays engaged. So those are the three things that you want to do when it comes to audience analysis. You want to do a demographic analysis, an attitudinal analysis of your audience, and finally, an environmental audience analysis.